Obviously, someone who's strong in budget and finance or has a strong foundation there is going to be very important. I would like to see someone who also has strong communication skills and someone who's strong with regards to customer service. I know we stipulated last time that the manager live in town. I think that's really important. And I think it's important to select someone who is going to become invested in the community, who wants to raise their family or who wants to join organizations within the community, like other managers have done in the past. So I think that's really important. Myself personally, I'd like to see someone who appreciates the concept of sustainability. I think that's something very important, and I'd like to see it work. A village manager, he or she, would have a.
Sorry, it's not. You can keep going.
Okay, who has a strong background there. So that's the gist of my comments. Just wish you all good luck, and looking forward to you all making a great decision. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Okay. Anyone else would like to come up and speak?
Good evening. Matthew D'Alessandro from 843 South Michigan Avenue. I echo Bob's comments on a few things. First off, good luck with this process. I know it's a tough and challenging process, but I feel like all of you guys up here are up to the challenge, and will be very thoughtful in your decision. I really personally would like the stipulation of that the manager lives in the village for the same reasons of being invested in the village, and seeing as they'll be personally affected by the decisions they make and the board makes. So to have a big impact there. And one of the other things that I'm really big on is collaboration and culture, establishing the type of culture that the village operations is going to work under, making sure that it's collaborative, thought-provoking, and challenging of the employees, giving them opportunities to voice their ideas, and to make sure that it is a collaborative process and not, my way or the highway type deal. So I just want to make sure that and to allow people to move up through the village. You can take a role, an entry-level job, and wanting to progress and move up within the village, and to better their careers, but to better the town. So those are a couple of my thoughts, and I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with.
Yep. Thanks, Matt. Anyone else like to make comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 4A, discussion of the village manager interview process. And for that, we have Katie Rush and Rick Janix from GovHR. They're the company that we had hired to assist us in the hiring process. And I believe Katie will kind of come up and give some pointers here.
Good evening, President and trustees. Can you hear me okay? Hopefully I project all right. I've got some years of experience being a village manager. I retired from Woodridge in 2017 and served in DuPage County as well as in Cook County in Riverside as the village manager or village administrator previous to coming to GovHR. And Rick, my associate, has recently retired from the village of Oak Brook. He also served in Downers Grove and in Brookfield. So we're pleased to walk through with you tonight the interview process for your next village manager. And that's the focus tonight, is the process. So that is what we're going to be talking about. There's a variety of options that you have available that you can select from. But what we are going to recommend is what we feel will work best for your community. And obviously, that's something that you have the ability to change, and I have some options in here. So later tonight in executive session, we'll provide an overview of qualified candidates, and we hope to reduce that number to a manageable size, so that we can proceed with interviews. By the time at tonight's meeting, the candidates have already been had a video screening with either Rick or myself for 45 minutes to an hour. We have reviewed their resume, we have checked references, and we have completed a review of their social media. In terms of the process, what we would like to recommend is essentially, the first round of interviews and then a second round of interviews. Now, in terms of the first round of interviews, what we would like to do is recommend that we have 4 to 6 candidates be involved in that initial interview stage. Those interviews could be done virtually, which has been the practice in the last 2 years in many, many communities. It does afford you the opportunity to, for example, include individuals from out of state without having to pay their expenses or anything like that. It also allows you to get a sense of the candidate and still allow additional opportunities for input. So what we would suggest is that these interviews be taken place virtually. We would suggest that they include a village department head panel or your senior staff panel. These are the individuals who are most closely going to be working with this individual. The feedback that you would get from your department head panel would be gathered via SurveyMonkey, so that it would provide some anonymity to those individuals. It would provide you some strong feedback and perspective from your very trusted employees and your very, in terms of their operations and their comfort level. They would also have the opportunity to provide some questions to those candidates so they could do some additional probing. But that would be like a Zoom panel, and it would be probably during the day. In terms of the next aspect of the first round of interviews, you would have the village board, or the village president, excuse me, and the board interview the candidates. That also could be done via Zoom. You would then have a debrief session, and that would afford you the opportunity to deliberate amongst the pros and cons of those candidates and narrow the field to 2, 3, 4 candidates. Before I go on to final interviews, I wanted to take the opportunity and ask if there were any questions, or I can proceed if you'd like, President Cuzzone, and just kind of keep going through the next session or next phase.
Anybody questions? Why don't we do step by step and then
Okay.
we'll go on. Just Corkery?
So would the department head interview be separate from the board interview, or would it all be as one?
No, it would be a separate panel.
Sure.
And what we have been using typically is, perhaps an hour interview for each candidate, 50 minutes with about 10 minutes for them to score each candidate. And then we have been using a SurveyMonkey tool to gather that perspective. It is done not immediately after. There's usually, say you do the interviews for the candidates in the morning, and then the elected officials would either be in the evening or later afternoon, so that we give them the time to do that scoring. We would gather that information and bring it with us to the debrief.
Trustee Slow.
Hello. At what point in this interview process would there be input from our residents?
Let me go through that. That's part of the optional process. So if you were going to put resident input in, that would be in that first phase, or it could be in the second, but I would suggest being in the first phase, the first round of interviews. But I will go through the various options before we get to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, towards the end, once we get through the second piece.
Question? Okay, let's go on.
Alrighty. So once we get, and we're making progress, you're all humming along and you're making progress. We are going to have what I would suggest is a couple-day interview process for these candidates. Have them come in a day in advance, have them tour the community with a trusted staff member. Some communities use the Chamber of Commerce, that might be another option, but have that person drive around, included in all of the, kind of ins and outs of the village, look at the facilities so that they have a good grounding in what they would be coming to manage if they came here. I would also encourage a lunch if that's available to them. It offers them an opportunity to have some informal interaction with that individual. Could be coffee as well. That informal piece of it with the whoever's giving the tour really does offer a lot more conversation, puts people at ease. So I would encourage that. In terms of either later that day or a second day, I would have the finalists do a presentation to the elected board. And it would be, maybe a 5 to 10 minute presentation, similar to what you would have on a board item at your meeting. So you would get some materials that were prepared from this candidate. They would have the opportunity to provide an overview. You would have a really brief opportunity to ask questions, do a Q&A just like you would in a regular board meeting. And, see how that individual reacts, what the information is shared, if it's clear, their homework, etc. It would be followed then by regular Q&A, right? So a different set of questions than you had in the first interview, more in depth. We would likely identify series of topics for that second interview post interview one. So in that debrief, there might be topics that come up that you say, I'd really like to hear more about their management of tips or their involvement in facilities management or project management. And we would have in that second interview a little bit more focused questions on specifically those types of topics that the board has identified. I'm happy to write those questions, or Rick can write the questions. So you don't have to worry about that. All the questions will be prepared for you. Once you have that conversation and you've had that second round of interviews, you would hopefully land on at least one candidate who all the board members support. It's very important that you have an alternate. And the reason for that is that in this market, what we have been seeing are that candidates are maybe the candidate of choice, and they might leave or drop out for any number of reasons. And you don't want to necessarily have to restart that process. So it's good to have an alternate candidate. And then we would talk about what the salary is, the offer. We would do that after the final interviews, because You don't want to talk about salary too soon. You need to actually go through the process. Select the person who you want, and then go into that salary conversation. I know that there has been some interest expressed tonight by some residents as it relates to residency. That's also when you would talk about that matter. Going to public participation. It is very important that the board controls this process and that the board seeks input from those individuals in the community, if that's something that you would like to do, that provides you really objective, considerate feedback. So what we would recommend, if you want community input, I would suggest that you do a community panel. This community panel would be as a part of the first phase of the interview process. It would allow residents or perhaps trusted stakeholders to have an interchange and exchange with the individual and provide you a sense of their suitability, their qualifications, perhaps their background pieces. And this would allow, it's included in the cost, it's not anything extra, but it does provide you specific quality feedback where the individual is seeing the questions being answered and the candidates are not exposed too early to the public. One of the things that potentially could happen is that you will lose candidates in this process because you are sharing their name too widely too soon. Many of these individuals are employed. You do not want to jeopardize their employment. It's helpful that we keep it in confidence as long as we can. With a community panel, you have the ability to ask those residents to not disclose individuals' names, and so you have the ability or the potential to keep it more closely held. Another opportunity is a public reception. This is something that some communities use. It might be an hour-ish to allow an informal opportunity for residents to drop by the village hall and mix and mingle with the candidates. It would be all the candidates, all the elected officials most likely. You could invite your staff or not choose to do that. And then you would invite community members. So essentially you could do it on a Saturday morning and have coffee. You could do it in the evening and have cookies. The difficulty with that is that the interchanges that are taking place are very social in nature, more subjective. There is not necessarily an opportunity to hear about the individual's experiences in any set specific situation. You're not comparing apples to apples in that typical situation. So there is some danger to it, but some communities do like that. The second is a public forum. We recently just did this in Oak Park. Most communities do not do this because it really does put the candidates up front and center. It puts them in a very public situation, and it's significantly uncomfortable because they are generally all on the same panel, and they're responding to questions on Zoom or in a situation like this where the reception or their responses are being broadcast. To get feedback after that type of situation, we would do a SurveyMonkey link on the website. Again, you get feedback but whether or not you would get a wide participation amongst the community members, if they then complete the SurveyMonkey tool, there's a lot of ifs that go into it. And there is an additional fee related to that option. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions about either the final interviews or the public participation piece.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Trustee Kumar?
Yeah, about the community panel, what do you suggest the number of individuals can be and how we choose those individuals for a community panel?
Because, you know, the interest is a lot of times that the trustees want somebody who perhaps they feel trusted and they want to have in their feedback loop. I would suggest that at least every elected official have the ability to pick one and then an alternate. Because depending on the date that we select for the interviews, you might not be able to have that, alternate 1 versus alternate 2 participate. And you want the same number, you want that same panel to be consistent. And so that's how I would suggest you would do that, is every trustee would select at least one. And then you might have either, you would tell me, pick a school superintendent and see if we could get a school superintendent or perhaps somebody from the business community, 1 or 2, but no more than 10.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So we need some direction as to, in terms of the process. So in terms of the initial interview, is what we discussed all right? So we have the village department head group and then the village board interview panel. Are those 2 pieces, are we keeping those included?
Personally, I feel that we should. I think since he or she will be interacting with staff, it's definitely an important part of it is for staff to interview. Obviously, interview with the board. I'm not so sure about public interviews with the candidates. I think there's a couple of things, and one of them, as you mentioned, is confidentiality. And at this stage, a lot of these people may be working already, do not want it out that they are interviewing with other, with another community, for another job. I think getting public input is good, but I think as far as interviewing, I don't know if we should go that far. At least that's my opinion. But I don't know what the rest of the board is thinking.
I mean, this is the board's decision. So there
Right.
are communities, in fact, one community, they didn't even include the department managers. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it just depends on your
Right.
choice.
Yeah, and it is, it's the board. I mean, that's why we were hired, and that's why we were elected here. And that's one of our main things is to hire the village manager. So we have to make that decision. But again, that's Trustee Kumar.
I personally like the community panel idea. I think it supports kind of a hybrid between keeping things confidential. Usually, as she said, we can get anybody on this panel to sign off that they will not release information. It just gives an extra set of questions that can be asked that may not come to the mind of us as a board. We are only 6 individuals. An extra set of individuals on may give us a flavor of the best candidate that we might miss, honestly speaking.
Trustee Patrick.
I also am in favor of the public participation. I think that's a great way to get the public involved on another level with us. I completely understand confidentiality, and I agree with Trustee Kumar that if we can hash that stuff out before the interviewing takes place, I think that would be very successful for us here.
Trustee Kozak.
What about kind of a hybrid model with the community panel, and maybe do a dedicated special meeting that is kind of analogous to coffee with the board without the candidates, where any member of the public can come in and we can just have a back and forth kind of dialogue with the public to discuss what they're looking for, what they think is important, give our public a voice to be able to come to a meeting in a formal setting, public, and talk about whatever's on their mind with regard to the hiring of a manager. Then maybe step 2, scale that back to everybody brings a friend, so to speak, somebody from the community to participate in that interview process. So it's not everybody from the community, it's just a couple of spokesmen
Yeah.
type people.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Yeah, I would be in favor of that. That's something good, outside of having the candidates themselves, talking to them. But if we do that, I think we should do that pretty soon, though, early in the process, so that we can make our decisions, before we lose too many candidates. No, I think that would be a good idea. Trustee Murphy.
Yes, it was my understanding that that's what tonight was supposed to be. That's why we were having this 1-hour
Right.
session tonight, was to bring people
Yeah.
in and get their input as to the characteristics of the person they were hoping for, and I would like to see, if we're going to move forward with this, that there are very specific criteria of the people that you're choosing to participate, and they would be business leaders and not just basically, quote unquote, bringing a friend. I mean, there would be very specific criteria of the qualifications that we're looking for in the people that would serve on this panel.
Trustee Kumar.
Yes, I also corroborate, I thought today was that day, but I do realize that the timing that we had, the turnover time to get people in here to have this discussion was very short. And that may have driven some people not to show up. We had to really have more time to reach out. So I am not against having another meeting or a more informal meeting to have a discussion on what people would like.
Trustee Kozak.
Maybe rather than doing a whole special meeting, maybe we can just dedicate a section of the next meeting and have it be less formal than the 3-minute, up at the podium type thing, where we can have a little dialogue and maybe dedicate, whatever's necessary, 15 minutes of that meeting to that. And if, as we go throughout the process, maybe we just need to do that at every meeting coming forward, just a small period of time to make it casual and not do special meetings necessarily. I think that would kind of at least open us up to allow people to come in, whether or not they participate. That's up to them.
Trustee Solel.
I agree on the meeting portion of it. I do think we should include a level of input, not just, don't take this the wrong way, anybody, from a professional level down to the blue collar. I think there should be a mix in there, not just someone who might be on the school board or someone who may be a lawyer that's in this town. That's all fine and dandy, but I think we need to mix in some of our real people, our blue collar people that have a lot of length of living in this community, and take their input into the mix. So I'd like to see some of that.
In terms, may I just respond to that, and to Trustee Kumar and Trustee Murphy? I do think it's important that while it would be nice in some ways, perhaps, to have the individuals on the community panel certified in some way, shape, or form, perhaps with HR background or something like that, I have a strong preference for what Trustee Sela said, that each trustee has the opportunity to select an individual that they feel will do a good job in this regard, and that each of those individuals feel that your elected board feels like they've had the opportunity to have input in the community panel. It would become very difficult to make, it would be like a whole nother hiring decision to vet those individuals. So I would suggest that the opportunity be left to the trustees if you are going to have the candidate panel. And I do think if there is a concern about having a larger number of individuals, then keep it to 7 and keep it simple.
You know, I think we kind of figured not having like a candidate panel, it's more just bringing in
No, I'm talking about the community
the
panel.
community panel.
The
Yeah,
community
okay,
panel.
right.
Excuse
But
me.
not talking to the candidates themselves.
Right.
Correct, okay, I see what you're saying, okay. Trustee Kozar.
I'm just a little unclear by that last statement. The community panel, my understanding of the community panel was the top candidates would be at the community panel. You'd have a limited number of people from the community, say 7, to engage in some sort of interview type process.
That was it. The community panel that I am suggesting is one where you would have each of the candidates, similar to the department head panel, would come individually to meet with that community panel,
Right,
Yes.
and they
Right.
would have a Q&A.
right.
Yes.
Okay, so that is my understanding. So that community panel gets to actually interview the candidates.
Correct.
Yes.
They're all remote. They're all far away.
Trustee Kumar.
Would that be a remote process, or would that be a in-person process with the community panel?
I would say it's probably going to be more successful in terms of timing to do it remotely, but we're more than happy to do it on the same day that you would have your department head panel. It would just be a series of, we make the candidate have the whole day.
I am really favorable to a community panel. I'm not just favorable to having a discussion with the people. I think getting involved makes you more vested in the process, and the community members that whoever chooses will be more vested, and we will get more information from that process.
Trustee Murphy.
I don't have any problem with that. My concern is that I feel like these people need to be vetted. We've got some circumstances where, unfortunately, there have been people, particularly on the night that Manager Keener was voted on, that have had less than exceptional histories with the village. And if they're getting selected to be on these boards, then we're loading that panel with very specific types of people, and that's what we're trying to avoid with this whole process.
Trustee Kozar.
I don't think Trustee Murphy maybe wasn't following along. You were suggesting every trustee pick one person. And if every trustee picks one person, everybody who is picked, in some sense, is vetted by that one trustee that chooses one person for the community panel. Nobody's weighted one way or another. There is no second interview process. That's it, one for one. That makes sense.
That is correct. And the way you're going to get the feedback from those individuals is through a Survey Monkey. So there's not necessarily a whole lot of dialogue back to the board.
Okay. Trustee Patrick.
Thank you. Again, I am in favor of the community panel as well as what you might call the hybrid model, having a meeting prior to. My question is, with the community panel, if this is done virtually, do we have the ability to record that and then broadcast it for the public to see at a later time?
You could do that. I would encourage you not to. It would, it would be as though you were putting those interviews on public
Okay.
today. And I think you want as much honest feedback and interchange and exchange as you possibly can get between that group.
Trustee Kozar.
round of interviews for the department heads as well as the community panel. Am I correct in saying that it would offer no participation, those two elements, from trustees, right? It would only be department heads that were to be talking to the candidates.
Right.
It would only be the community panel that would be talking to
Right.
that.
Yeah.
That said, I would like to have the ability for every trustee to just watch those interviews, not participate, not interject themselves, but be able to observe them for whatever information that they glean from those interviews, because ultimately it's the board that's going to be making those choices. If they hear or see something positive, negative, whatever it is, in those two forums, I would like, if a trustee wants to participate in that simply as an observer, I would like that to be a possibility.
Again, I would say that, with all due respect, there is the potential that if they have oversight or outside, and I'll use you guys, even though you're not really outside influences, but you would be not necessarily a part of that panel. You might have the impact of stifling the conversation or stifling the feedback and the responses. The opportunity for the elected officials to ask all the questions would be in your session. If you would like to have some type of debrief from the community panel or from the department head panel in addition to the Survey Monkey, there might be a staff member who could be asked to join your village board panel and provide the pros and cons of each of the candidates. So they would say, according to the feedback from the department heads, this is the pros and cons. Again, it puts the staff person in a bit of an awkward situation, because potentially they're going to be working with this individual or their boss. If they have something that is not necessarily favorable to share, and you go ahead and you still hire that individual, it might come back to haunt that person. So it's a concern.
Yeah. And we will get the survey results, which
Right.
would be good. Yeah.
Can you give me an example of just, I'm having a hard time conceptualizing if a trustee were to be observing in the background with no ability to speak, how it would be stifling, or what might be shared that would be a negative in a trustee making a decision, would not help our board make a decision.
Well, I'm not saying that it might not necessarily help you, but unless all of the elected officials have that same opportunity, it might not be, no, I mean that day.
Mhm.
They might have other things going on, excuse me. And so it might not be, unless all of you can come, I would say none of you can come. I don't think it's that you are creating a level playing field. If Trustee Kozar has information because he was able to attend, but Trustee Corkery couldn't attend, I think it just creates a level of information that I would prefer to keep it similar. Now, the board can do whatever they like, but that's my preference.
Yeah. And you've got the experience at doing it. Trustee Corkery.
How common are community panels when you're hiring for a position like this?
How come there are not?
Oh, so how common are they? Sorry.
How common are they? I'm trying to think. In the last 3 that I did, 1 used them. In the ones that I have coming up for a chief elected official, I have a department head panel, but no community interaction.
Well, I'd be in favor of it within the parameters that you guys set out.
Trustee Kumar.
I have a suggestion for the briefing from the community panel. Maybe within that community panel, someone, and it doesn't have to be chosen today, can act as the liaison for that community panel, whoever's chosen with, and they can choose by themselves as a panel, and can give us a briefing on the information from there. That will help us kind of weigh the cons rather than a department head, because that puts them, I understand a department person taking care of the departmental or within staff, a staff person taking care of that, but I feel like the community panel is for the community. The person who should do that should be from the community.
Is that something you all would like then? So you would like the community panel, 7 for 7, so one person per, and we would give them the Survey Monkey, and then we would also have an optional opportunity for one of them to come and address the board, talking about pros and cons for each of the candidates. Does that sound good?
Okay. Trustee Murphy.
Yes, I'm in favor of the community panel. I am not, however, in favor of the trustees picking a person. I would prefer that whoever the community panel would be selected by would be vetted by someone alternative to the trustees.
Well, I don't know who that would be.
And
That would be a
who would
tough.
that
Who would
yeah.
that
Good
be,
question.
Christine?
Yeah.
Good, that's a $1 million question.
But that's your suggestion,
That is my suggestion.
which is what? It's like a half a suggestion.
Well, first and foremost, I prefer that you not speak on my own behalf, trustee Kozar.
I'm not, I'm trying to
However-
understand it.
Thank-
I've just, based on what we've seen at the Coffee with the Board and some of our board meetings, I am not comfortable with some of the trustees picking people because we're seeing hand-picked people, once again, that have been challenged by our village, that have been put into these board settings and put there with intended purpose. And I think that's a problem when we're making a decision of this magnitude. And I'm concerned that that could happen. And I'm expressing myself openly and honestly.
Trustee Kumar.
Remember, Trustee Murphy, I understand your concerns in some ways. But in the end, it's our decision who we choose. And their input is simply input. And we're just getting another form of input. So I think the more information we get, the better we will be, and better we will be able to choose a better candidate. There are people out here that have come to speak on what they want for candidacies, some of whom I trust personally to be a part of this panel, for instance, and I'm sure that there are more people out there that each of the trustees trust, and you can't assume that it's going to be one-sided when there are literally 6 trustees and 1 president who get to choose someone on the board, including you. So think carefully about who's going to give you that information, and please choose aptly.
Trustee Patrick.
I think the debrief after the community community panel is a great idea. I would be in favor of that as well. So just so that way I'm understanding where we're at with everything right now, because we've had some lengthy discussion. Are we agreeing on a community panel with a debrief and then also another meeting for the public to give us their thoughts and concerns without any candidates there? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think we discussed just having the public can come at a regular board meeting and give what their feelings are. As far as the panel, probably we should do a consensus to see if that's what the board would like to see. The consensus being having a panel, each trustee picks 1 person for that panel, and then 1 person from that panel will debrief the board on their decision. I think that's what the consensus would be. Trustee Kozar.
I'd like to just state again that I really think any trustee up here should be able to simply observe the department heads meeting with the candidates that we're ultimately voting on, as well as being able to view the community panel as it goes, with no participation whatsoever. Each one of us only has 1 vote, so if there's 1 person who dedicates a lot of time to watching them all and has more information than others, that trustee still only has one vote. And ultimately, it's the trustees that are voting. So the trustees, the board up here, should have the maximum amount of knowledge that they have the time and desire to get. And no information as to these candidates should be kept from the board up here, or consolidated, edited, or debriefed in any way. We should have the ability just to witness it with our own eyes and ears and make our own determination as that information comes out.
Personally, I would like to go with GovHR because they're the ones that have experienced it. I think we'll have our chance to be speaking to the candidates, and with the information that we get from the monkey survey, I think would be enough for us. That's my opinion. I don't know if anybody else has. Trustee Patrick.
Just a quick question for GovHR then. If these are done virtually via a platform like Zoom or Teams or something of the sort, it is a possibility that that link could be shared with the rest of the board and they just don't turn on their camera. Is that correct?
Yes. Like I said, you can do all sorts of different things, but yes, you can do that.
Trustee Corkery.
I'm going to come at it from the other way. I feel like if the GovHR people don't feel that we should be observing those interviews, if those should be between the between staff and the candidates, or between the residents and the candidates, I think we should go with that. And we will have a lot of time to talk to them and get input from the people on those panels. So I'd like to follow the process laid out on this one.
Okay. All right. So let's get let's get consensus on the community panel, and then one person reporting back to us, so we can get a consensus on that.
Okay.
Clerk, can I-
Okay. Trustee Corkery,
I'm sorry, what is this for?
this is a consensus to have a community panel. One trustee and the president would choose one person for that panel, and then one of those panel members from the community would then debrief the board.
Yes.
Okay. So that was a yes vote as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Silella,
Yes.
Trustee Patrick,
Yes.
Trustee Kumar,
Yes.
Trustee Kozar,
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
President Kazal.
Yes. Okay, so then let's get a consensus on whether the board should be able to observe the staff and the community panel observe that Zoom session while it's going on. Consensus on that.
Okay, and the question is, would the
Is it
panels,
affirmative or is it negative?
yes, would they need to know they have someone else listening in?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
they would have to.
Okay, so they would know
So they would know, yes,
the board
correct.
is listening
Right,
and
so
not
this is,
participating.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes would be allowing the board to watch this.
Okay. Okay, Trustee Silella,
No.
Trustee Corkery,
No.
Trustee Kumar,
No.
Trustee Kozar,
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
No.
Trustee Patrick,
Yes.
President Kazone.
I say no. Okay, so we will go with that as far as direction for you guys to go through.
Great. That'll help us in terms of our setup. It also allows us to share that information back to the candidates as they go forward. And I think that's it. In terms of dates, we had offered, in terms of trying to set up interviews on Monday, April 18th. That would be only with myself. I'd probably have to get an individual to help with the community panel, but that's all right. Rick is just not available that day. But we do have others in the firm who can and are used to doing this, so that's not a difficulty. Or I can look to the next week, either the 26th or the 28th. If you want to do this in the evening for the board, I would need to know that too. So just in terms of, the department heads would likely be during the day, the community panel also likely during the day, and then the elected officials either that evening or another night.
And this would be just for like 4 to 6 candidates? This is not for all, yeah.
That's my hope, is to
Yeah.
get 4 to 6 candidates. It gets complicated with 3 panels.
Yeah.
And
Sure, okay.
6 candidates.
I have a concern about
Trustee
the community panel being during the day because I'm not sure about the availability of different members that we might choose during the day or night until we choose them. So this may be an issue. So I want to make sure that, whoever chooses, whoever they choose is able to be there.
You're right, well, that's why she had said they should have 2.
Yeah, we can have an evening. as
Okay,
well.
okay.
That's fine, I just need to know kind of what the game plan would be.
Yes, absolutely.
So that when we're setting the schedule up, we would need both dates then. So it either include, Monday the 18th for the community panel and the department head panel, the community panel being in the evening.
Okay.
Or we can do the 26th and the 28th and split them.
Okay.
Okay.
Trustee Murphy?
So based on that, can you help me to understand when you would need the board availability, which of these dates?
Well, that's my question to you.
Okay, because what I understood you to just say was you were saying the community panel and the staff would be potentially on the 18th?
Right.
And
but
if we just said we're not going to have the
If you
board
want to have them in the
participate?
evening, the community panel in the evening, it's at the same time, it's concurrent with the board, we can do that. So that we have one panelist in one room, and the other in the other. So that's a potential, you just have to let me know
Okay.
how you'd like to handle it. Really, I need to know the date that you all would like to be there. That's my preferred comment tonight. I can tell the department heads when to come, and
Yep.
the community panel, I will just try to find a night.
The 28th does not work for me.
Okay.
It's a
Trustee Kozak.
Thursday.
Okay, I preferred the 26th to the 28th, but if it doesn't work for trustee Kumar on the 28th, 26th is preferable.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes, I provided my availability to Suzanne McVeigh, and maybe the best thing is that everyone does that and she can sit through that. I think we're going to have a challenge getting everyone available on any particular date. Personally, I'm pretty much okay with the 18th, 26th, and 28th and 5/5, but 5/13 and 5/14 I will be out of town. So I think this conversation is going to
Yeah,
elongate,
you're
and we
right.
just
I
need
think
to.
we can work on dates separately,
Okay,
okay?
okay.
That's fine, because we have a long night ahead of us. in
Yes,
terms of
okay. Okay, that sounds good.
I have a wedding.
Okay,
Anything further?
I have, any other questions? Okay, I have 2, I should have done this earlier, and I apologize for that, after the comments. I did have 2 emails, that people wanted read into the public record regarding this. The first one is from Donna Knoxon, a resident here. She said, "I would like consideration to be taken for Michael Guerrera to be our village manager. Mr. Guerrera is an asset to this village. His knowledge of public works is a bonus. He has shown his capabilities in the short time he's been interim manager. Mr. Guerrera has made sure that everything has been done to ensure we receive our $10 million grant. In addition, he keeps a pulse on all available grants for the village and is not afraid to pursue them. He is also very financially responsible. He's not afraid to shop around for best pricing while still maintaining quality product and/or service. Overall, his knowledge, experience, and education of this village should be considered in your search for village manager. I ask that you all look in your rearview mirror and remember what Mr. Guerrera has accomplished in his short time as interim manager." Excuse me, the next email was from Susan Cartwright. "Since it is now time to search for a new village manager, I feel this is an appropriate time to express my concerns regarding the practices that have been in place from that office for the past several years. The previous manager had a policy that employees and staff were not allowed to speak directly with the trustees without the knowledge and consent of the manager. Additionally, Section 2-330B prevents trustees from discussing conditions of employment with staff. As a former employee of the Village of Villa Park, I would like to express my support for changing this ordinance and policy. I worked for the village in several different capacities from 1994 to 2021. In every position, I loved my job and never had any performance issues. For the last 13 and a half years, I worked in my final position. I never had any issues with my supervisors. I had 4 different ones in a period of 7 years, until May of 2020. At that time, a new director was hired. From the first week, I was harassed and treated unfairly for 9 months until I was forced to resign. So here's where the problem lies. I had no one to turn to. The village ordinance, section 2330B states, employees are not allowed to speak to any trustees without the approval of a village manager regarding conditions of employment. However, the village manager hires a director and would always take their side. No one besides the director and the village manager was aware of this treatment because I had no one to report to. Trustees were not aware of these unfair practices because the village manager did not make them aware that there was a problem. He allowed this treatment to continue. The union was aware of the issue due to grievances that were filed against me by the director. It's totally unfair that employees cannot discuss these types of situations with the trustees. This type of treatment to an employee is serious and not acceptable. Trustees hire the village manager, so they should be able to expect the village manager to be accountable for their actions. Trustees are required to do an evaluation on the manager's performance, which includes his management of his staff. However, how can they when they are not allowed to talk to staff? Current board of trustees is doing an amazing job at putting the village on a positive path for the future. Let's allow them to do the same to employees. Okay, with that, we are going to executive session, section pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2 C1 regarding the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of a specific employee of the public body, and section C3 to consider the selection of a person to fill a public office when the public body is given the power to appoint under law or ordinance. Clerk Konecki.
Oops.
Before you go into executive session.
Well,
What's
we had
that?
a person- She
She
had
wants to
time
make a
for the
comment
public.
before.
Yeah, we have time. No, not really. We're-
It's something that I would like to point out before you go into public session after you spoke. In general.
Attorney?
Would you do that?
The mayor has already asked for the motion to go into closed session, and the time for public comment has closed, so.
To make a public comment, we don't get to hear what the board has to say before, which kind of concerns the public in general.
Yeah, but we've already been there. I can't do that. The motion's already been made. Clerk Konecki.
There hasn't been a
don't have a
motion, the
motion
mayor
yet.
has called
Okay.
for the motion.
Yeah.
Okay,
Call for a motion.
okay. Do we have a
Motion to go into exec session, I'll make that motion.
Okay, second?
A second.
Trustee Slow. Okay, Clerk Konecki.
Okay, trustee Corkery,
Yes.
trustee Kozar,
Yes.
trustee Salella,
Yes.
trustee Kumar,
Yes.
trustee, who did I miss? Murphy.
Yes.
Did I say Corkery? Kumar, okay, and President Kazone.
Yes. Okay, we will go into executive session. We will adjourn out of executive session. We will adjourn the meeting, so we will not
I
be
think I
back.
did get
Kevin?
Patrick
Did you
was the
call
one I
Kevin?
missed. Kevin Patrick, I'm
Yes.
sorry, and that was a yes. I
It
think
doesn't matter if
somebody
you
was
say
missing.
Kevin, we
Sorry.
Our next board meeting will be April 11th at 7 o'clock.